G'day students, today we're having a look at the landscape of early childhood development, also known as ECD. In 1994, South Africa held its first democratic election and Nelson Mandela became our president. This saw a massive shift, not just in our political environment, but our social and our economic and our socio-economic environments. An analysis of early childhood development was done using government reports, where the early childhood development sector was investigated. Remember that before 1994, people were not given the same level of education. And there was something really hideous called Bantu education, which was a lower level of education given to all non-white citizens of South Africa. Now, we're not turning this into a racial debate, as I know that this tends to be a very sensitive topic in South Africa, but we are looking at the facts of the matter pre-1994 and why they had to change post-1994 to ensure that all people in our country were given the same level of education like it is done so today in our mainstream society. It doesn't matter whether you're black, whether you're white, whether you're colored or Indian or Asian, you are able to have access to the same level of education in our mainstream schools, whether that is in my mainstream society. I'm speaking on whether or not you have equal resources to attain that level of education. If you can afford to go to a government school or a private school, it is now legal and common for all people, regardless of race, to sit in the same classroom like we do at our college. Now, using these challenges, a new curriculum, a new way of thinking, a new way of going forward in ECD was established. There was so much progress since 1994, where there was an increased access to grade R. This was major because now it meant that at the grassroots level, where our education really begins in the academic sphere, in the scholastic sphere, children were able to go to schools regardless of socioeconomic background, regardless of racial or political background. Higher government budgets for education and social development were granted to ensure that education started at a young age for all South Africans. Per capita subsidy for qualifying children in ECD centers were also increased, which meant that per household, more children were able to go to schools. Now, in South Africa, not just in South Africa, globally, you may find that in certain customs, in certain backgrounds, you will find, especially where there is no money, that that families have to choose who goes to school. Will it be our son or our daughter? Will it be one child out of three? Because there was an increase in the per capita subsidy, that meant more children per household were able to go to schools. That there wasn't as big a choice, if a choice at all, as to whether one child would go to school versus the other. There were more children in better quality ECD centers. There was a greater provision for ECD learning. So despite the progress, there was still significant amounts of work to be done. And until today, there is significant amounts of work to be done, as not all children are able to access ECD learning. And I hope that that is why many of you are here, to help that happen, to bridge that gap. The South African government prioritized early childhood development since 1994, and even today there are massive subsidies that can be given. There are grants that can be given to ensure that grade R learners get what they require. Granted, it is not as equal as it ought to be. It is not equal at all in some societies and spaces of our country, but we are working, and the government, I hope, is working towards bridging that gap. ECD is seen as crucial for breaking the cycle of poverty in South Africa. This is a very beautiful point to make because we are teaching children in their fundamental years not just how to read, how to write, but how to aim higher. And this is something I hope each of us can instill in our early childhood development classes, is to aim for a great vision. Now, you can look at this point from a secular perspective or a religious perspective. In our country, we have many religions, many views of faith, but biblically speaking, the Bible says, without vision, people perish. Now, we can look at that once again. You can look at it in the psychological sphere as well. These children need something to look forward to. That is why you are constantly asked, where do you see yourself in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20? What do you envision for yourself? What kind of person do you hope you will be? What kind of footprint do you want to have in society? And it's the same for these little children, that they ought to see something greater for themselves. And so inviting them into the early childhood development environment should give them that, should give them the opportunity to see that this is not where I'm going to end. I'm not just going to end after learning how to say b, k, and that is the end of my line. I'm going to go beyond this. I'm going to learn more and I'm going to be more. And this is why it is crucial for breaking the cycle of poverty in South Africa. Scientific evidence emphasizes the critical importance of early years for human development. Think back on your own years. Think back in your own foundational years. By the age of 5, did you not already think about your own identity? About the kind of clothing you like, the kind of music and food and so on that you liked, the way you spoke? Your identity is formed very much so in those early years, and we are going to learn a lot about the child rearing theories and child development theories as well. And many of the theorists believe that, or some theorists believe that you are formed by the age of 5. Your life will be sort of built on what you have learned in the first 5 years of your life. Some theorists say it's until the age of 7. Others, like Erik Erikson, will say that it is lifelong, that it goes all throughout your life you develop. And we will look into this in depth in your classes to come. In the meanwhile, we are looking at, that the building blocks of your foundation in ECD, and what you are teaching children in ECD, their diligence, the things that go beyond just learning to read and write as well. Although, of course, this is our main aim, is teaching children literacy, numeracy, life skills, and so on. Advocates investigating resources to support optimal child development from conception. So that first 1,000 days, which we'll also be looking at, so all the way from the womb onward. How does that build a child? The womb, if a mom is drinking, smoking, providing an unhealthy, a mom can provide an unhealthy environment for her child from the womb. A father can provide an unhealthy environment for that child from the womb because of lifestyle choices that the parents make. And already from conception, that child starts to develop. And so in the early childhood development sphere, we want to investigate how that child develops from conception until they leave our care, which is about the age of 6 years old. If a father is abusive, hits mom in the stomach, hurts mom, if there is swearing, screaming, and stress on mom, how is that going to affect baby? If mom is smoking, drinking, using substances, if father was smoking or drinking or using substances, all of these things might affect the biological uptake and subsequently the psychological uptake of that child from conception. Now, the lack of early childhood opportunities or poor quality interventions can disadvantage children significantly. Significantly. However, it's not the end of their line. It does, however, affect them very much so, because those first 5 years, they did not have the resources required. Think about if you, for 5 years, if you were stripped of your needs for 5 years, and then you had to get back on the bandwagon and suddenly you had what you need. Those 5 years will still affect you. They will still form your habits. They will still influence your decision making. And the same goes for children in those first 5 years of life. Now, I've got I've got a bit of an example here as I hear people say, celebrating children and their birthdays and their achievements in the first 5 years or the first few years of life doesn't mean anything. They're never going to remember it. I've got the theory, and don't use it as law. We are discussing. You may discuss with me as well. Think about how negative experiences shape you in those first 5 years. If a child is abused in those first 5 years, but they don't always remember the abuse, it will still pitch up in their latter years, in years post 5, post 6, post 9, because they shape you. It forms you psychologically, it alters you psychologically, and therefore, I'd like to believe that good experiences will also shape you psychologically. So, affirming a child in those first 5 years, celebrating their birthdays, showing them that they are important in those first 5 years, likewise will affect how healthy they are in the future. And so, of course, it is an intricate matter, and we'll deal with it more going forward with the child development theories. But keep it in mind how important these few years are. So when they have a lack, poor quality interventions, think about how it can disadvantage them. They never had what they needed in ECD. They didn't have the books, the stationery, the structure, the affirmation, and so on. Quality interventions during early childhood are essential for maximizing children's potential for success. Again, this is important. Teaching them how to read from a young age, teaching them to get into the habit of reading, how to speak, the way in which they speak. Now, this is important for you to understand as an ECD practitioner. It's the way you speak they will pick up on. You will imprint in them. If you talk down to a child constantly, it will imprint in them, and you will be responsible for breaking a portion of that child down. If you speak to them in an unprofessional manner, teaching them how to constantly just perhaps they only speak using slang. You only speak to them using slang. You don't teach them how to speak properly. You don't teach them about language development. Your own language is poor. Their language will be poor. Therefore, speak to them in the manner you hope they will speak in the future, because they will remember it. So you need to ensure that you maximize the potential for success. In 2014, South Africa had 8,007,723 children aged birth to 6 years. Over 8 million children birth to 6 years. 8 million children who are going to grow up, God willing, to be adults in our country. What is it that you want to teach them? The highest number of children were in KwaZulu-Natal, and Gauteng were the lowest in the Northern Cape and the Free State. Look at the big differences in those percentages. Despite a 15% reduction in poverty levels since 2004, approximately 58% of children are still classified as poor. More than half of children are still classified as poor. You get poverty, you get relative poverty, and you get absolute poverty. Either way, you've got over 58% of children whose basic needs are not always met. And these children are going to come into your classroom. And you, having some children who might be in the top 1% of the country's economic sphere, and then you've got children who are in the bottom. How are you going to teach these children on the same level to ensure that each of them have the resources they require? Neither of them are disadvantaged in your classroom. Remember, when they go home, there will be advantages for one and disadvantages for the other in terms of resources. And you now need to figure out how you are going to bridge that gap in learning. So there are many government resources that you can download online. There are free books that you can download online. And you can teach children from both spheres on that same level of resources. So, because they are given to you freely. So, as a teacher, you need to make sure if you don't always have what you need to be innovative and you need to find what you need, because at the end of the day, it is that child you are there for. It is not a case of, well, I want praise, so I need to make sure I've got my resources perfect. They must be from the most expensive space. I only get my resources from high-end places, and because I can't get them there, no one's learning. Believe it or not, I've heard and I've worked with teachers like that. And that is not what we are here for. We are here for those kids. So you make sure that if you don't have what you need, that you are innovative. Write a story if you have to. You've got amazing editing software online. You've got amazing tools that can assist you with this. You can go online once again, you can download. But make sure that these children are taught on an equal level, and don't lower the level for the one. Teach children that they are able to up their level. Okay, so that is different in terms of whether or not you can see a child is struggling with their learning. You don't just keep it at the high level and say, well, catch up. What I am saying is, you bring in the highest level of resources and teaching quality as possible. You don't lower the standard. You teach children to reach the standard. Poverty is concentrated among Black children in rural provinces, notably Limpopo, the Eastern Cape, and KwaZulu-Natal. If you are a teacher in an environment where most of the children in your class is impoverished, once again, don't say, well, this is all they get to have. Well, this is just their lot in life. Well, I'm just a teacher in a lowly place, and so I'm also not going to do anything about it. No, you do something about it. You bridge the gap. You teach them more. You educate yourself. You get those resources going so that we can show children that that is not it for them. That is not the end of the line for them. Service delivery for children is hindered by challenges such as inconsistent legislation, inadequate funding, and governance issues, including leadership and coordination problems. Now, we know about this from first-hand experience. We know about the lack of service delivery. We know about inconsistent legislation, although our legislation now is very much in favor of equality. But inadequate funding and governance issues, 10 entrepreneurs who don't build the schools they're supposed to build, who just say that they will or say that they do, but they don't. The government not coming out to sort out government schools where there are major holes in a wall, where a little child is supposed to be learning, where there isn't infrastructure available. And so teachers come in and we say, okay, what can we do to be problem solvers in the midst of issues that are very often beyond our control? And we find that children will learn from that affection that you share with them as well. So we are learning to bridge the problems, we campaign, we start fundraising, whatever it might be. If there's a problem out of our control, we see what we can control to bring into the classroom to solve those problems. Now, let us have a look at NDA involvement in ECD. The National Development Agency, in support of the Department of Social Development on provisioning of early childhood services, focuses on early childhood development programs that are not registered, those that are conditionally registered, and are geographically far beyond reach. These are programs situated in rural areas, informal settlements. This is how EDU-BUILD started, by the way, in an informal settlement, in an informal environment where the initial founder, co-founder, saw a need. She saw that in rural settlements, children are not getting what they are required to get, that teachers are not being trained because they don't have the resources. So she set a program. She put a program together and said, how can I teach these teachers in an informal environment how to teach as formally as possible? Eventually, it grew. It went into suburban areas, it went into high-end areas. It was registered. And today, the aim is still to reach all those who wish to teach, regardless of socioeconomic background. Now, these programs, whether they are situated in rural or informal settlements, where poverty is very high and have no means to access structured ECD-based environments, the NDA undertakes the following interventions. Capacity building of ECD, building institutional capacity for ECD. So center management, particularly in the areas of governance management, financial management, fundraising, human resource management, report writing, and how to register with the provincial departments. So it assists centers on how to comply with the norms and standards. Okay, so teaching them, regardless of where you are, whether you are suburban or rural, how to comply with the standard of the Department of Social Development. It works with ECD center infrastructure upgrades. Infrastructure is especially important in the ECD environment. Think about the warmth and the cold that these children have to endure in the respective seasons. Think about going to toilets. Think about when they have to play. These children need to be protected in their environment. It needs to be hygienic. And so the NDA assists with infrastructure upgrades. ECD staff development is also assisted with to ensure that staff members are trained, education, equipment is provided, non-center based ECD, so that is mobile ECD centers in remote areas. These are also proven to be a success because although we are looking at the most optimal environment possible, there where it is not possible, the teacher, you, the facilitator, you can make up for there where there is a lack in environment. You can make up in an increase in skill level. And so these places with a highly skilled education and a highly skilled educator, they are proven to be successful. Food and nutrition support. Children can't come and just eat pap every day for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner. They will be malnourished. And so having a healthy diet is also of the utmost importance, and the NDA encourages this by also providing fresh fruits and vegetables to schools. Now, this is not to say that this is going to happen wherever you are. You can just dial a number and the NDA will come around. There is an application process. There are application processes that are in place. And so the South African Early Childhood Development Awards also take place. And they recognize excellence in the ECD sector, recognize innovations in ECD training methods and practice, recognize best practice, encourage the pursuit of excellence in the ECD sector. The awards take place on an annual basis and recognize best practice and outstanding participation in ECD through the following 7 categories. Best ECD Center of the Year, which we have won in the past. Best ECD Practitioner of the Year, the Best ECD Trainer of the Year, Best Publication of the Year, Best ECD Non-Center-Based ECD of the Year, that is the mobile center we just spoke about, Best ECD-Based Disability Program of the Year, Best Center-Based Nutrition Program of the Year. Now let us have a look at the National Integrated Early Childhood Development Policy. That's important. We are definitely going to be doing policy writing through this course, so it's important that you become accustomed with it. So the policy development addressed gaps in ECD policy, emphasizing universal right to ECD services and benefits for children, families, communities, and the nation at large. The policy covers the period from conception until formal school entry, that is to say, until young children enter grade R, or until they reach the age of 7 years in the case of children with developmental difficulties and or disabilities, whichever comes first. The objectives in short are, so the long-term goal by 2030 is to have a comprehensive quality ECD service accessible to all infants and young children. The medium-term goal by this year, 2024, essential components of quality ECD services must be available and accessible. So that is the basic need must at least be met. And the short-term goal, which was by 2017, was to establish a legal framework, organizational structures, planning, and financial mechanisms for universal ECD service availability and access. Much of this has been met and is still working to be met. We do know that the government does take ECD rather seriously, and we hope that it will take it more seriously, definitely more seriously going forward, because it appears that the desire is there, but the execution sometimes falls short. So there is a hope and a prayer that the execution will be as strong as the desire. Let us have a look at the key positions in the ECD policy. The age coverage. So the ECD policy covers children from conception until the year before formal school entry, or until age 7 for children with developmental difficulties, as before mentioned, depending on which comes first. ECD as public goods recognizes ECD services as benefiting both child development and societal growth in the medium to long term. Please make note of this. I'm going to say it again. Recognizes ECD services as benefiting both child development, so that is the first thing it benefits, and societal growth in the medium to long term, that is the second thing it benefits. If you can develop a child healthily, you are on your way to developing a healthy society. Universal access. Government committed to ensuring universal access to ECD services for all young children in South Africa. This is the aim, and we are hoping that that aim comes to life. Dual delivery model supports a dual model of public and private delivery of ECD services, providing parents with choice while ensuring universal access. So not just a case that, well, this is it, this is what our country provides in terms of ECD, and you can take it or leave it, but it provides parents with a choice as to how to go about educating their children, where to go about educating their children. They can choose between private and public delivery, depending on resources, of course. Institutional arrangements and the role of the DSD. The DSD being the Department of Social Development. The government asserts leadership and coordination roles. So we now figure out who is in charge and who says who is going to do what. Supports interministerial, ministerial, and national interdepartmental committees on ECD. So again, this is a multi-level approach, and so you look at it is a hierarchical approach. And so who is leading, and beneath whoever is leading, who is in charge of particular departments, and so on. Establishes intersectoral forums for NGO participation at national, provincial, and local levels. South Africa has a three-tier system, a separation of powers in our government. And so the local, the national, and provincial, they have overlapping responsibilities, and it's a process of checks and balances. And so you think that they are each independent, but they keep one another in check. Okay, so they keep an eye on one another. So the local can say to the provincial, hey, it seems untoward what you are doing right now, and the national can say that to provincial, the provincial can say to the local, but they all interlink. Okay, so they all interlink. Think about the Olympic rings. Okay, each stand independently, they each have their own independent color, but they each link. And so that is the intersectoral forums that participate independently but interlinked. Infrastructure ensures sufficient infrastructure for ECD services across regions. Links infrastructure planning to population distribution for universal access. includes facilities for children with disabilities to promote inclusion in your ECD environment. Even if it is a mainstream environment, you have to have provision for kids with learning disabilities. Now, even though children with learning disabilities, especially if they are severe, they have to go to special needs environments, special needs schools, and so on. You, as a mainstream ECD center, you still have to ensure that you can provide for children with special needs, that your classroom can be inclusive to children with special needs. Of course, if you do not have a qualified practitioner, that child is better off going to a special needs center, but it is important that your classroom is open to inclusion. The communication strategy aims to inform and educate parents and caregivers on accessing and understanding the importance of ECD services. This can be done with information evenings, with handouts, and so on, monitoring and evaluation. So keeping an eye on the new information coming in as well, evaluating the curriculum, evaluating the ECD landscape and environment, making changes, and so on as one goes. Implements a national framework to track policy implementation progress. This is important because policy is not just what is put on paper, it is what is done. And that is how we study policy. You study one's policy based on what you can read on a paper. If it says all children under the age of 3 years old have have small classrooms with only 5 children and one main teacher, but in practice there are 27 children and one main teacher. That means the policy has to be, or the analysis of policy is also what is done. You are saying that our policy says one thing, but we do another. The other thing that we are doing also forms part of our policy. Then on research level, it is important that one does periodic research to assess the impact of ECD policy on service delivery. You do continuous research. You look at the period of time you are working in now, and you see, okay, this is what works now within this period. We need to relook at the research in the following period, because what we have found in period A might not work in period B. So let us say that your policy works in winter. You've got policies in place for winter in terms of your infrastructure, and you'll find that in summer it does not work. This is a different period. So you re-evaluate your research, you look at it again, and you figure what works and what does not. You also look at whether or not there is progress that is happening. So now that we've made a little bit of progress, let's re-evaluate our research and see what else needs to be done. We look back, we do a bit of introspection to see what is working and what is not, and then we redesign our policy based on this. The role of the NDA plays a significant role in training and implementing of ECD policy across the sector. As we mentioned, the NDA has a hand in various sectors of the ECD development, in various elements, from infrastructure all the way to staff training. Then the challenges of early childhood development in South Africa is the apartheid legacy. Under apartheid, South Africa's education system favored white children with free education, while black children attended tuition-based schools, limiting their opportunities. And not just that, but the level of education was also very largely different. Now, we are, thank goodness, moving into new generations where the apartheid legacy fades away more and more with each generation as we are moving forward to something new. And we are saying that once enslaved us does not anymore. And so we are moving forward to say, well, okay, well, today we can all sit together and have the same level of education. Today we are able to attain the same resources. Of course, this is not the case in every household, in every place in South Africa, in every area in South Africa. And so we study where the legacy remains in those areas and where we have moved forward in other areas. The current challenges in ECD: less than 9% of children have access to preschool. Less than 9% of children have access to preschool, with even lower access, 6%, for Black children due to financial constraints, inadequate facilities, and untrained staff in creches. Many creches lack essential resources like food and proper equipment, and training and teachers' salaries are minimal. Don't you know it? Hey, as a teacher in the ECD field, you know more than anyone that those salaries are minimal, even as a qualified ECD teacher. Of course, it goes up depending on in which area you are teaching, depending on the socioeconomics of that area, depending on whether it's a public school or a private school, and so on. But these contribute to a high turnover and poor child to teacher ratios. The current demographics and provision: approximately 6 million children under 6 years old live in South Africa, with 5.3 million being Black South Africans, split evenly between rural and urban areas. That's an interesting fact, isn't it? Split equally between rural and urban areas. Only 9% of children receive care from a private or community-based organization, highlighting gaps in service provision. Community initiatives and government support. Community-driven efforts have filled gaps left by government neglect of educare responsibilities post-apartheid. So even after 1994, we speak about the apartheid legacy pre-1994, and we have to consider post-1994 the fact that service delivery is still not what it should be. The fact that children are still not getting what they ought to get because of government negligence in our current time. Over half of creches were initiated by communities, underscoring local initiative despite limited government assistance. And this is why I say, as an ECD practitioner, you have to ask yourself what you can do to ensure that these children have the highest level of education possible in spite of governmental shortfalls. You have to decide if you are going to help the community move forward in ECD training and how you are going to have that done. Community-based programs include center-based provisions, playgroups, nutritional support, and parent education, designed to be responsive to local needs and promote community participation in early childhood development. You are going to be doing a participatory needs survey later in your course, not too much later. It's going to be within this module that we are currently doing. And you are going to learn to survey the needs of the community as well, because it is one thing if you say, I'm going to open a community center for children to learn, but then your community center does not meet the needs of the community. You are sitting in your head, you are sitting in a completely different community. You're speaking Italian in a place where we only speak isiZulu or Afrikaans, and no one understands what you're saying. You need to meet the needs of the community. The role of NGOs. Non-governmental organizations facilitate creche and educational development by offering training, guidance, support, and financial assistance. They help creche facilitators meet ECD curriculum standards and achieve accreditation as teachers. Public funding and its impact. Governments at national, provincial, and local levels mobilize public funds to support ECD programs. Aims to protect children and women's rights and foster human resource development and improve educational outcomes. It is essential for enhancing the effectiveness of South Africa's education system by investing in early childhood education. So public funding is there. It is available, not as readily as would be preferred, not as readily as it should be, but it is available, and it has assisted many ECD centers in its development. And there, where we cannot get public funding, we need to work towards private funding by doing community fundraisers and involving the community in the importance of ECD. Now, let's have a look at early childhood development. So, community-based early childhood development. It encompasses the holistic. Now, when we look at holistic development, we speak about the different tiers of the person: the spiritual, the physical, the mental, and emotional. So that holistic, the whole person development of children from birth to school going age, focusing on physical, psychological, cognitive, which is your brain's functions, memory, um, thinking critically, and social aspects, crucial for establishing a strong foundation that influences lifelong outcomes. This is what we spoke about earlier, not just outcomes for now, outcomes for the rest of the child's life, including breaking cycles of poverty and promoting economic activity. So, teaching them that they must be role players in the economy, that they will be skilled one day, that they can be doctors and lawyers and singers and artists and whatever it is that they aim to be. Difference between childcare course and ECD qualification. Let's have a look. This is important that you know. Childcare courses equip individuals such as parents, nannies, or babysitters with skills for informal childcare settings. They are usually short courses and they happen quickly, emphasizing communication, care, nutrition, and early developmental detection. So, having a look at their milestones, what they need in their immediate environment, whereas ECD qualifications, which range from certificates to degrees, prepare individuals for formal roles in structured ECD environments like preschool teaching or management of ECD centers, and this is what you are here to do. Then formal ECD qualifications. These include certificates like your N4, N5, and N6 Educare, which is very different to NQF. Remember, N and NQF are not the same. Your N levels usually have about 60 credits in child and educare, whereas your NQF 4 has 131. It used to be 143. And your N level will have about 60. So very, very different in terms of credits. So this could be from diplomas and degrees up to NQF level 8, like your honors degree. Available through public or private colleges with higher education institutions offering degrees and postgraduate diplomas in ECD. Let's have a look at our stakeholders in ECD. So our stakeholders being the people who hold stake. So they've got responsibility, they might have something to lose, they have a hand in it, they have something to gain. These are stakeholders. They involve Gauteng provincial government departments, the municipalities, NGOs, and ECD practitioners. You're a stakeholder. Your client is a stakeholder. The child is a stakeholder as well, because everyone has something to gain and everyone might have something to lose. Collaborate to deliver ECD services and support. So all of these agents collaborate, aiming to enhance developmental opportunities across communities. This is your first lesson. This is your look, your overview of ECD, what it entails, and why it matters in your community. I hope you have learned something in this lesson. Please feel free to contact me at any point should you have questions or queries. Any point meaning business hours. Thank you, and good luck with your activities to come.